Some Stuff Matters podcast.
I'm Iola Divine. So the first question I really have is about the laws of attraction and what all you think are the various components that go into the laws of attraction that do due diligence to how it actually is coming back to us. You know, is it just thoughts, feelings, and the physical, or what do you see as being all the various possibilities of why things would show up in our world?
I think that's a good question, and I would like it if I could give you a simple answer.
Absolutely. No, that's great. That's even better. I just, it seems...
able to do that.
Okay, wonderful.
Just look at things as much as I can from many angles, and there's always lots of angles, because I see it's all part of one vast geometry, and at any time we're just conscious or aware of one portion, small portion of that geometry. So if you make it more specific, it would be like if you're looking at this dandelion head that's gone to seed, and you see all those seeds coming out from the pod, and so you beam in and you just look, you know, there are too many to count. I mean, at least for me, but as I'm looking at it, I'm getting, like, I see the whole, and then I go in and I can see the parts and so on. And so to me, everything is like that. And so depending on, you know, how much we want to zoom in, zoom out, how much of that geometry we're going to relate to at any given time. And I think it starts with our consciousness. And so as we are expanding our consciousness, what that means is we're able to perceive, connect with, be part of consciously more of that geometry. And I love that view of it, because to me, it makes it all very, very wondrous. And so it's like we can, you know, Jesus said it, he said, you must become as the child. And so there's lots of levels of meaning to that too. But one of the meanings that I take from that is to have that sense of wonder, you know, to walk around with that sense of wonder, because everything becomes new with each shift of consciousness, because we connect with more of that geometry. And you know that the word geometry means it's the divinity of God, basically, is what geometry is. And so it means at that level connecting more and more with God's own consciousness. And so in terms of the laws of magnetic attraction, it applies there too. And that is what I just said about the geometry. And so there are many levels and angles we can look at. If we start with consciousness, which I think is the true starting place, then we have to look at, well, what makes up consciousness? And so we know that we can define 4 levels of consciousness: the superconscious, the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. And that there are different activities, there's different action, there's different patterns and so on going on at each of those levels of consciousness. And so the more we are bringing all of those levels into our oneness, then the more what we're holding in our consciousness is what we really are. The less of the awareness we have of what's in those other layers of consciousness, the more what we are relating to as our consciousness is only one small aspect, and we won't be master of, in charge of, directing those other levels. And so we know that yogis, for instance, learn how to discipline their down at the unconscious level so that they can discipline their heart rate. They can discipline their breathing and so on down at the cellular level. They can be aware of what, of being able to be master of it at that level. And so when we're at that level of mastery, then of course that means what we're holding in our consciousness is going to be that much more powerful. And so do you see what I mean about the different levels of this?
It definitely makes sense.
It's a reason why the masters have emphasized our dealing with our psychology, is so that we can bring those other layers of our being into our consciousness to the extent that we're in charge of them. And so it's really important, as we want to expand our conscious awareness, that we are dealing with what's at other levels of our consciousness. And so then it becomes making decisions, making determinations of what elements we want to continue to identify as ourselves and which ones we want to let go of. And we know we have methods of letting go of those unwanted patterns. And so it's very wonderful that we have ways in which we can deal with those parts of our non-conscious mind that we don't want anymore to be part of who we are, part of our consciousness. And so as we do that, we bring more and more of it into consciousness. That is, more and more of ourselves become into consciousness, and we can act in more powerful ways. Well, you can understand that, going back to the law of magnetic attraction, that if you have a powerfully developed consciousness, what you hold in that consciousness is going to be that much more significant in terms of its impact. If we have developed our consciousness in a powerful way, then what we're holding in it is going to have a bigger impact. And that's why we have to be more careful even about what we're holding in our consciousness. And so, because we do many things with it, we impact all of life with it. It's one thing. And so we impact it for good or for ill, depending on what it is. And so we want to be master of our consciousness. So when it comes to how we attract, well, we know the law of magnetic attraction is that likes attract, opposites repel. Now, the more we've integrated our consciousness, the more that will all be the same thing. In other words, what we're holding in our consciousness will be what we attract or repel. But when we have a subconscious and an unconscious that are doing very different things from what our consciousness is, then we'll have different effects going on. And so what does that mean? That means that we may be holding some anger, for instance, in our subconscious over some treatment we got that we thought was unfair, but we haven't registered it on our conscious mind. Nevertheless, we're holding it in the field of our consciousness, and so it's attracting and repelling at the same time. So in the sense of likes attract, it's going to attract those kind of energies. And so and a lot of times we do that when we're still in the process of developing our consciousness, and we don't realize why something just happened. But in actual fact, we've attracted it. And so we know, for instance, that there are floating grids of various frequencies around the world. And these are made up of what is being projected out into the world by the many people in the world. And when those go out by the law of magnetic attraction, they come together and they create like a cloud, a floating grid, which then can be attracted by that quality of energy. And so somebody who's holding on to a serious negative energy like anger, who is allowing it to in a sense consume them, to be fully activated within us, then that can attract one of those floating grids. And so what happens then? Well, that whole grid, and depending on the size of it, but doesn't really matter. What is going to do is it's going to augment, it's going to amplify that field already being held in that person's consciousness, and go way beyond whatever limits they might have put on themselves with just their own grid, with just their own feelings. And so we have people, it happens a lot. We see all these shootings and all these bizarre expressions of anger all around the world, and we get lots of different reasons given for why they happen and everything, but a lot of times when people are interviewed about it, they say, I don't know what came over me. And so that can be a cue of one of these floating grids descending. So when we're becoming more conscious and we want to be in charge of what we do, of the impact that we have, we want it to be a good impact. And so we don't want to create a condition which by the law of karma will have to be cleaned up. In other words, it creates a debt to life, and we'll have to clean it up sometime. We want to keep serving life so that not only do we free ourselves of any karmic debt, but we're in service to life, and that's a very wonderful thing to be in lots and lots of different ways, because even as we're saying that like attracts like, well, as we're serving life, life serves us too. It's a figure-8 flow. And so we don't do it because we're looking to get a reward. That's not why we do it. But when we serve life, when we do kindness and compassionate and loving, caring expressions toward life, we will also experience that. And as we do that, as we get into that rhythm, then it becomes like, why would we do anything else? You know, like what could be better than that? And so that was a lot.
That was absolutely wonderful, Caroline. Really insightful and really succinct for something that's actually, it's funny you said it was going to be simple, and it is, but it's also, you know, not exactly as simple as it's been made out to be. One of the things I'm wondering when you talk about like attracting like and opposites repelling is that true even when there's a repulsion of something in your consciousness at one of these 4 levels? Wouldn't it be the case that being repulsed by something actually attracts it to you through this sort of this merry-go-round of shame and blame that so many people have a hard time getting off of? You know, we talk a lot about not being attracted to something and not being repulsed by something. And something that I think that I've been seeing is that sometimes being repulsed by something is actually what attracts it to you. So what I'm wondering is if that makes sense to you as well, is there a way to just give a little dimension to that aspect of it, knowing that, you know, in a way that's something attracting alike, even though it's the opposite side of a coin?
I think I understand what you're asking.
Okay.
I think there's 2, as always. I think there's more than one level here. So the level of repulsion in the laws of magnetic attraction, that repulsion, I think, is a different thing than what we're saying when we talk about feeling repulsed by something. And so what do I mean by that? Well, when we're repulsed by something, there can be quite a lot of things involved in that. Numbers of elements of our consciousness, of our patterns of our consciousness that create that sense of repulsion. And so that repulsion is not the same thing as this repulsion I'm talking about in the laws of magnetic attraction. That's a different thing. And so in terms of if we're experiencing or giving off that sense of repulsion, we're going to attract repulsion. If we're holding that in our field, we're going to attract it. And so what the repulsion is, for instance, let's take it at an absolute level, just to get simple. At the absolute level, we have light and we have dark, and we have the darkness that is repulsed by the light, and that darkness will seek to in some way do away with that light, because it creates a condition that the darkness has to deal with, and doesn't want to unless it's serving the darkness somehow. And so at the absolute level, we have the darkness that is offended by the light, that is repulsed by the light. And so we have the more light we're carrying in our consciousness, then the more offensive, the more bothersome we're going to be to darkness with that light. And so that darkness will, in its repulsion to the light, will attempt to destroy it somehow, either to enslave it, that is, make it work for that darkness. And we've seen that in the discussions that we've had recently about the narcissist, sociopath, and psychopath, that the only way that the narcissist is going to allow light to be around that darkness of the narcissism is when it's using it as fuel. And so in that repulsion to the light, it finds a way to subjugate that light and make that light less offensive, less I don't know, I'm having trouble with some words here because I'm speaking so many levels all at the same time. But that's one level of which the repulsion doesn't mean that it necessarily drives away. When we're talking about states of consciousness, it doesn't look quite as simple. And so the dark can actually be attracted to the light, not because it loves the light, but because it wants to subjugate it or destroy it, and or like in a way doing both at the same time. And so at that level, like you read Taylor Caldwell's Dialogues with the Devil, and you see Lucifer and how he, with each new planet, with a new infant humanity begun, he's already looking for ways that he's going to turn them to darkness. And so it's not that he's, being repulsed in the sense that he's moving away. He's actually going toward it, but with the intent that he's going to turn it to darkness. And so at the level of consciousness, there's something else that happens, because we have the free will, that beautiful grace of God that gives us the opportunity to keep expanding and growing into that vast consciousness, as long as we're willing to choose to do so. And so the free will choices mean that we can operate not independent of the law, because the law is always active, but we can shift its action according to how we want to pursue whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And so all that's big picture, and come down to the level of human beings interacting with each other. And we have that same principle, which Jesus expressed it as, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so that's that very principle. And it's true, and it doesn't take a lot of a lot of experience to know that truth. We can experiment with that and see it as a tangible reality. And so that comes back then to the place where we started out, which was, if we want to experience joy, love, caring, then that's what we want to hold in our consciousness, and that's what we want to send out to life. And what we will experience in return is joy, love, caring, and so on, coming back to us in all kinds of different beautiful, miraculous, wondrous ways. And to the point where when we're looking that way, when we're looking at our life that way and holding that in our consciousness, we come to the place that El Morya has described again in Agni Yoga teaching, where he said that life becomes a wondrous fairy tale. And it's like that. It's like every moment becomes there's something wondrous, there's something extraordinary happening every moment, because what we're actually doing, to go back to the first concepts I was exploring, that geometry of God, what we're actually doing is allowing ourselves to keep seeing new elements of that geometry. And it can't be anything but more and more wondrous. And so that's where we go when we get into the immortal state, where we've earned the right to be immortally in that consciousness. Then we're continually expanding our awareness of that geometry and the exquisite design of it. And so it's ever more wondrous. That wasn't simpler.
No, that was amazing. It's raising a couple more questions in my mind. If we're ready for a couple more here. One is, if you've seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, or you've heard people talk about the relationship of, what we know from quantum mechanics as it relates to thinking, and how, the observer basically changes the outcome. How do you see that concept, which of course a lot of people in the science community think is, new age people trying to take something scientific and making it bananas. But how do you see that being related to the conversation we've had so far?
Well, I'm familiar with that. I've seen that movie, that document, and so I'm familiar with the concept, and I think it's right. I think that's why there's more than one of us. If there was only, if we weren't to add new dimension, then there wouldn't be a need for all of us. And so the reason why there's all these unique beings is because each one is destined to add a new quality. And so I think that's true. We do add something new to it.
That was a really powerful, very succinct answer, Caroline.
Yeah.
Impressive. I think one of the questions people may have if they read some of this or even hear some of it would be, okay, so if I'm trying to apply this to my world and there's something in it that I would prefer not be there, how do you advise people to go about figuring out what it is that that came into their world, and whether they were a part of it or what role they played in attracting a specific scenario?
That's a very good question. And like all of them, has many angles to it. So let me start with one. We've attracted an individual into our life, and we don't want to continue that attraction. That, in other words, we don't want to have that keep happening. And so what can that be about, and what can we do? Well, I'd like to say this in as simple a way as possible, but I'm not sure that I will. The first thing is that we just take for granted that we're the source of that attraction. But that attraction may not all be just something that we're holding in our thought and feeling world. That may be a karmic tie. In other words, a past life account that's come due. And so the only way that I know of to resolve a past life account that's come due is to pour as much love into it as we can. But what does that look like? Because that's important. That doesn't necessarily mean that we engage in a loving relationship with an individual. Not necessarily. It might, but not necessarily. What it means is that whatever we do in that relationship, we do from a base of love. And so even if it's a setting of a boundary, thus far and no farther, as we say in the inner family archetypes, the loving father. So if we set a boundary, we do it from a love base. And so if it's a karmic tie, that's what will complete the karmic cycle and free us of it. So that's one level at which we attract things, is that we have, at some point in the history of our embodiments, we have created a tie with this individual through some negative interaction. Some way we have either harmed life or not been caring toward life. And so it comes due. Nicholas Roerich says, have you learned to love your returning karma yet? And his reason for saying that, every time I read that in one of his books, every time I read that, I would say, no, I haven't learned to love my returning karma, and until I got it. So there's a point at where we get it. And when we do, then we see yes, because every time we take care of that debt to life, we're freer. And it makes a difference. It's a noticeable difference. And so it can be seen on the level of just individual finances. If we allow ourselves to get into a state of serious debt, then we're like on a hamster wheel working to overcome that debt, and so we're not free. And so, but the freer we are, the less debt we have, the freer we are to use the energies that we have to do those things that are ours to do as part of the unique adding to that divine geometry that we're intended to do. And so then when we get to that really seriously, then we want to meet our returning karma. So back to your question, which was about we've attracted something. So there's a first element in it is to recognize that we might not have consciously held in mind an energy pattern that attracted to someone. It may be that it's something still within a level of our consciousness, at the non-conscious level, that is needing resolution. And so that's a way that we can go about making sure that we're going to get free of it, is to make sure that what we're doing from a base of love in that relationship. And so supposing it's some other form of attraction. In other words, we have something in our subconscious, which is also referred to as our desire body, the emotional level of our consciousness, where we hold an idea or a wish, a desire for something that at a conscious level we wouldn't desire that. And so there's another level, which is when we have something come into our life that we say, how did this get here? I prefer this not be here. Then we have to do a little analysis here to see what this is about. And if it's a non-conscious desire pattern, then we want to get into touch with that and change it. Choose instead to identify what we want as that which we are consciously choosing, not something from some negative pattern. Give an example. This is something I see over and over again in counseling work, which is that we're often trying to reduplicate our parental patterns. Why? Because there's something we wanted we didn't get in that parental pattern, whether it's with father or with mother. And so we try to make that happen in our adult life, meaning that it's an illustration of how having a desire, non-conscious desire, can attract into our life something that isn't what we would choose if we were fully in charge of the choice. And so what can we do about that? Well, I think in this instance, it's a good idea to be looking at, what is in our subconscious mind, and choosing what patterns we want to have there. In other words, how do we want our emotional selves to express? And so I don't know that it means going to a psychologist. I'm not saying everybody needs to see a psychologist. I don't think that's true personally. But it does take some focus and discipline to really look at our non-conscious patterns. And so I think there's different ways to go about it. I think that's one of the useful elements of the interfamily archetypes, is that as we look at the 4 aspects of ourselves, father, mother, boy, girl, and look at the different expressions of them, then get to see what's expressing most through our subconscious, which one of those, and whether it's the loved or the unloved aspects of those archetypes. Because what we want to do is we want to bring all of our archetypal expressions into being the loving archetypes. And the more we do that, the more we integrate our consciousness, and the more we come into that place that I was describing at the beginning, which is where we see ourselves as an expanding part of the geometry of God, and we're adding our own special flavor, if you will, our own special flame to it. And so the interfamily archetypes can be a way to do that can be helpful if you don't choose to go through the counseling route. And I'm sure there are other ways too, but that's something that I think of in the moment.
Caroline, how do you know if you've attracted something? What would the difference be if you attracted something from your subconscious versus your unconscious?
Well, I think that's a good question too. And I'd have to think about it somewhat to give a really clear answer. But one of the things about the unconscious, is that it holds our rejected self in it. It's the self we've said we don't want to be. And because we haven't dealt with it sufficiently, it continues to be a part of our consciousness, that is, our unconsciousness, but it doesn't go away until we deal with it. And so, because it's a rejected part, that means when it shows up, we're not going to like it. It's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be attractive. In dream work, when I analyze dreams, unconscious dreams are pretty I would say obviously unconscious dreams, in the sense that they don't make sense to our conscious mind. They're strange. It can be nightmares. They can be just ununderstandable to our conscious mind. And lots of times those never come into, we don't even get to know those kind of patterns consciously because we don't allow them. Whereas subconscious dreams will tend to take more the patterns of our day, what Freud referred to as day residues. And so things that have occurred over the day, and they will play out in some way, in a subconscious way, in the dream material. And the difference between both of those and a superconscious dream is that a superconscious dream is usually vivid. That's a distinguishing characteristic. It has a vividness to it, like it really happened. And so at a dream analysis level, it's I won't say very easy. It takes some experience to discern those differences, but it's not a hard sort. So to look at it in terms of what we're drawing into our lives, it will be similar to that. The unconscious is going to be drawing more of what we think, that is, of what we respond to at a conscious level as not pleasant, not desirable. But again, here we have to look at the karmic element of it. That's why I started there, because that flavors all of this. And so it's like it's not going to ease. It's going to be an uneasy fit in our life, whatever that is. The subconscious, it can have what comes can seem to be attractive. We've drawn something attractive, and we can feel like it's a nice thing. But as we continue to relate and experience it, we can come to a place where we start to see that there's parts missing. It's not all the way we want it to be. It's not all as we think it should be. So that's the best I can do with that one right now.
That's great. I want to be mindful of your time, but I do have a doozy question if you've got a couple more minutes. I have the hardest one. And if this is unanswerable, no problem at all. But one of the things that I'm wondering, given there's such a big dichotomy in the US, is there a way to apply this knowledge to help bridge the gap between the left and the right? In the way that we essentially, how do we create the world that we want to have by applying these principles?
I think it is a wonderful question, and it's definitely one we're going to have to deal with individually and collectively. And so the first element of it, I think, is that's where we have to embrace a consciousness of oneness. We're all on this together. This is a mighty starship that we're on, and we're on it together. And so let's make it the best that we can together. And so, but that doesn't mean everything goes. That means there has to be some agreed upon principles. The first order of the universe, the first principle of the universe is order. So there has to be a way in which we agree that we hold order. And I think that means we don't walk around saying, well, I'm going to kill you and so on. If you do something or say something that I don't like, it means we're going to have to be able to find ways of settling our differences so that not that we're all the same, we're not, never will be, we're made uniquely, but that we can engage cooperatively for the good of all. And so I think that's what we're going to have to come to.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, you nailed that one. I thought that was going to be very difficult. You just flew through that with flying colors.
But when we get right down to it, however, making that happen is a challenge, no doubt about it.
Definitely. I really appreciate you doing this. I know this is a little bit out of your normally scheduled program, so
Good.
I really appreciate, but you did a great job, and maybe we can do this again.
Thank you.